Brilliant. Thank you very much. All right, let's just start. Amazing bunch of people on stage. So I'm just going to get started by going down the panel and getting a quick introduction from everyone, please.
Sure. My name is Brar. I'm the head of festivals for Nodwin Gaming. Some of the festivals that we are best known for include Bacardi NH7 Weekender, Comic-Con India, and DreamHack, which is our big esports and gaming festival.
Oh, hello. Yeah, that does sound better. Hi, I'm Akhila. I head a music distribution company called TuneCore. We are also sponsors for this event. I head the South Asia region, so which consists of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And we help independent artists distribute their music to 150 plus stores across the world.
Hi, my name's Deepti. I work with YouTube. I head music and podcast content strategy for APAC and the MENA region. Really happy to be here today.
Thank you. I'm Mandar. I'm the CEO of Times Music, a record label and a music publisher from India.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So I'm going to just quickly drop some really big numbers on everyone and just set a bit of context here, and then we'll get into the panel. I mean, obviously, the big number is the population of 1.4 billion people, north of that, making it the most populous country in the world, ahead of China, overtaking China in the last couple of years. Within that, you have 900 million people online, which is an enormous number itself, but that also says that there's 500 million people who aren't online in India, which is incredible. Within the 900 million, you have around 600 million smartphone users. You have about half of the population are under the age of 30, which is an incredible, these are all incredible statistics, really. Of these smartphone users and internet users, there's about 185 million people streaming music in India. And as of quite recently, this is, I think, a sort of fairly anecdotal number, but there's around 7.5 million people paying for premium subscription for music in India. So these are enormous numbers that boil down to actually a really quite tight sort of commercial end of the use of music. And actually, India is the most poorly monetized music market in Asia, as tracked by IFPI. So it's around, I think, about 30 cents per capita versus somewhere like even China, which is, you know, I think $1 per capita, and all the way up to Japan, which is $20 plus per capita. So India, in my mind, is probably the most exciting market in the region, if not the world, going forward. But the economics at the core of it are quite difficult and show that there's a huge sort of room for growth. But looking out across this country, which is effectively a continent, there's actually only 3 genres. Is that right, Akhila?
Yeah, so you can slice and dice the data any way you want. So there are genres, but the running joke is that in India there are 3 genres. It's happy love, sad love, party. Like, because there's no in between. You're either sad or you're happy, or you can also party sad. That's another option.
So there's subcategories there. So it's quite a bit of nuance, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously we're joking here, but I mean, it's an incredibly diverse market. And I think from an international perspective, you look at it and you just think, actually, India is really just about film music, Mandar, isn't it?
I think India broadly is a lot more. I think I have to agree with Akhila, just to get back to it about genres, that firstly, film music is really pop music. It's just that it appears in a film. So it's not actually a genre, it's all pop music. That's one. Number 2 is consumption-wise, we were always a song-driven market. And now we are slowly turning, or rather mid-pace, into an artist-driven market. And hence the rise of independent music. So today you'll hear the term non-film, which broadly encompasses regional music, pop music, and everything that you have. And then you have film music. So I would think Bollywood, and largely to call it film music, still is a very, very, very large driver. No mistakes about it. But the growth in artist-driven, what we term as non-film, is pretty significant if you look at the numbers now. So I don't think Bollywood's going away anywhere. It's just that the pie is increasing significantly.
And what are the main drivers of the growth of non-film music?
I think it's pretty much artists. If you have to say a particular genre, I don't think I have an answer for that. It's just that there's always been non-film music in India for the last 20 years or 30 years over a period of time. We have one of the greatest A&R people from India in the room, Atul Churamani, and he was responsible for the rise of Indian pop. But it's just over the last 4 or 5 years that platforms have come in that enable musicians, platforms like TuneCore or Spotify, YouTube, even Instagram. And like Akhila said, the genres are not about pop, hip hop, rock, and all of that. It's really how a music supervisor would actually define the genre. That's the way we look at genres. So it's a significantly young population, um, pretty much encouraged by their younger parentage group to pursue a musical occupation, an artistic occupation today, compared to being a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, aided by platforms and the opportunities, and even record labels that are investing very, very heavily in that sector.
You mentioned platforms there, and I think it's difficult to overstate the impact that YouTube, or the importance that YouTube has in the Indian market, as a channel for this new emerging creative class to sort of reach their consumer. I mean, Deepti, from a YouTube perspective, how do you see the well, let's just say the rise of non-film music on your platform?
I think it's not just the rise of non-film music, but also regional music. We've seen that increasingly in spades, especially, just this week, if you were to look at YouTube India's charts, the top 5 tracks, 2 of them come from Telugu film music. One is a Marathi film pop, which more or less tells you the state of things, right? And I think this has only been possible because of this multi-format flywheel that has been created, which enables music to just travel across borders or boundaries or language barriers, which earlier used to be an actual thing. But today, because fans are being able to engage with music, irrespective of where it comes from, in so many different ways, I feel like that's given the rise to this entire conversation of, is Bollywood on its way out, which I don't think it is, because film music will continue to hold the kind of space that it does. But the other thing to consider is that maybe these lines are really blurring,
I agree.
and the audience today is not thinking of it as film music or non-film music. They're just looking for great music. And I know it sounds cliche when I say this, but if music is good, it will flow like water. It will find its audience. And what today's ecosystem, especially on YouTube, helps you do is connect to audiences beyond what you thought was possible. So there might be someone in gaming, there might be someone who's doing a fashion vertical, or they're talking about sports. But there is a way for music to find a connection with all of those verticals and reach new audiences, and hence, it affects distribution, it affects discovery, it affects, it gives audiences and fans newer venues to connect, and that's what's giving a rise to this.
Can you give some examples maybe of how you partner with, I mean, Mandar mentioned the difference between the song-driven culture, which is perhaps the dominant culture in India, versus the artist-driven culture. Can you give maybe an example of how you distinguish between those two, or let's say how you might work with prominent artists outside of the film space on YouTube?
Again, I would want to steer away from outside of the film space, or this classification that we're driving. But I would think that a song today, or in music today, is no longer just being heard. It's being seen, it's being created with. There is a lyrical version of it. There are remixes. It's riffed. There are memes and so much more. So the opportunity that the artist has today is the ability to find creators who are going to help put their expression, the creative expressions, in many different formats, whether it's long form, short form, whatever the user is inclined to engage with at that particular moment. So because this becomes easily available, and this is available to both film artists as well as non-film artists, I feel like that's what's really giving people inroads into creating greater audiences.
Uh, Akhila, so from a TuneCore perspective, what can you talk about in broad trends across the languages, the genres that you're seeing trending across India?
Absolutely. And it's very interesting from a TuneCore perspective because we cater to independent music. So for us, English is actually still a pretty big language that artists release in. But of course, there are your top languages like Hindi and Punjabi, which tend to dominate. But what's very interesting, at least in the last 12 months, and Deepti, you spoke about Telugu sort of rising as a language, is we are seeing that both Hindi and Punjabi, they're sort of hitting their plateau. And the real growth that we are starting to see is actually from some of the southern markets. Uh, Tamil is a language for independent music that's growing like really fast. A lot of that music is being driven by hip hop as a genre, even Kannada as a language. Telugu is still very dominantly film, so for us, not so much, but we do see that it's just about starting to pick up. So it's in the early stages of an independent music scene that's beginning over there. The other thing, which is also very interesting, is I like to look at YouTube charts because it's a nice view into where India or DSPs will be 2, 3 years down the line. So, for example, like Bhojpuri as a language was like up there on YouTube charts for so long, and for the longest time, everyone said Bhojpuri is music that you see, you won't hear it, right? But that's also starting to change. And like, I was very surprised to see we have independent Bhojpuri artists releasing on TuneCore. And so these are like very interesting trends. And like, what is happening is more and more of middle India, tier 2, tier 3, as we call them, they're coming onto the internet. A big part of this is also because like after 2016, when Jio, the network provider, launched, we saw two things happening. One is use of Wi-Fi dropped. Like we literally saw use of Wi-Fi go like this, use of 4G go up like this, which also meant people from different parts of India who were previously not even on the internet came on to the internet. And then when they came on, they were like, hey, I want to look for content that's in my language, but they couldn't find it. But because the audience was there, the artist kind of followed. So it's very interesting to see this is a very language-driven consumption, not so much genre, to be honest.
So there's 22 constitutionally recognized languages in India, but there's 700 or 800 kind of other languages. I mean, that's just remarkable. But the idea that there is these languages from across the country that are exploding in their own ways, and yet they're somehow instantly mainstream, they're instantly national. Can you explain to like a non-native that, how languages kind of sort of can become national mainstream when there might be a lack of understanding in some places, or how does that work?
I'm trying to answer this question, but I didn't get it.
Well, how is there a sense of sort of national cohesion in the music scene? Because there is a mainstream, and there are national artists, well, with a huge amount of national artists. But when there's such a mix of languages, how is that possible?
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I think for a lot of people outside of India, they think Hindi is the official language of the country. It's not. Okay, it's only spoken by 49% of the people. So there's a huge percentage of people who speak quite a lot of other languages. For the longest while, again, because, and I will tell you this, like, cut back to, let's say, 10 years ago, Bollywood was like 98% of all consumption. But obviously that has changed because, music also got digitized. A lot more came online. But the other interesting thing is I think we're seeing a lot of language agnostic listening that's come up. So for example, when Telugu is trending on YouTube, it's not only Telugu listeners who are listening to it, it kind of transcends. People who listen to Hindi music are also listening to it. Not necessarily for the lyrical content, it's for a certain beat. Again, the ones that tend to cross over within India, they tend to be in the party genre, so really upbeat music. So to answer your question, I think while there is a sense of identity that comes with language, with music, it is really more about the sound, like what Deepti said. So you hear, so many people listen to Punjabi music, but Punjabi is only spoken by what, I don't think 6% of the population?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Or more.
He's good with the numbers, so I'm going to get my answers from him. But 6% of the population might be speaking the language, but it is top 2, top 3 on all platforms. So you really see this moving beyond language, but more for the sound of it. And that's another very interesting thing that's happened in the last few years. It's also another reason why you see K-pop growing really big in India. It's not for the lyrical content.
If I could take a stab at this, I think one of the main reasons also is participative fandom, right? And when you're creating something with a sound that you've liked, somehow the language of it is no longer a barrier. And one of the things, I had prepared myself in case you asked me, what was a song that you are listening to? I was like, I want to give him an answer that's going to stick. But one of the songs that really made an impact in the past few months for me is the song called Gulabi Sari, which is a Marathi Indian pop number. But the way I discovered it, and it was because of a short, and it has over 2 million shots. And I'm sure all of those shots were not created by people who only speak or listen to content in Marathi, right? So I feel like that is what's also really helping us, helping these languages come to the fore. It would have been unheard of, Ed, for a Uttarakhandi song to make the top charts on YouTube. As in, we weren't even sure if there was a market for Uttarakhandi songs, right? But we saw something similar happen with Haryanvi a couple of years ago, and it really blew up. And there is a bustling music industry lean in for that language.
I agree. Yeah.
So we're seeing this explosion of creativity and music being made and released outside of the film sort of system. And as I mentioned at the top of this, the economics at the bottom of that are quite tough because of a low subscriber rate, for example, and sort of per stream rates in the market are still quite low. So from an artist perspective, development perspective, we're seeing a really interesting, and it's a global story, but actually in India, it's incredibly interesting, the superfan idea, or the idea of a more sort of holistic approach to a direct relationship with the fan. How, Deepti, are you seeing that kind of play out on YouTube? How are you helping artists to develop direct relationship with the fan? And what kind of sort of premium, just more broadly to everyone else, what kind of like more premium experiences and access are we seeing between artists and fans in India?
I'm going to go back to participative fandom being the most exciting thing to me about India and how it's really blowing up, right? And what we've seen over the last couple of years is various stages of fandom also come in. So there's your casual fan who's just maybe engaging with your music on their feed, they're liking it, and they move on, right? And then you have the fan who's a little more invested, and then they start talking about, oh, what can I do with this? They'll create a meme, they'll create a short, and they'll be like, okay, this is how I've engaged with it. Then you will have your super fan who's, hey, how can I inspire other fans to create something because I really love this artist and I really love this song? And then, of course, you have the professional fan who is a creator, right? And what they do with your music transcends all of the other fan groups that I've spoken of. Not transcends, translates. But this is what we've been noticing about superfans. And our advice to artists also is to tune into that fandom and see how you can get all of these wheels turning to make sure that your music is really traveling as far as it can.
So that's the participatory superfan. I think the global story of, there's X amount of people who are willing to pay $10 a month for a premium subscription. In India, saying, there's 7.5 million people, and that's a very low number. But the theory being is that there's a far higher number of people who, given the right opportunity, will pay a premium to access the direct relationship. I mean, Tej, in the kind of experiential space, if you like, in the live space, how are you seeing artists build that, or build that connection with their fan and then monetize that in a better way?
Yeah, I think one of the big trends that's kind of emerged is we've seen meet and greets become monetized with fans at shows. You can now pay to go backstage, hang out with your favorite fan, take a picture and all of that. That has not existed in India before. I'll say this has emerged in the last year and a half. The other sort of trend that we're seeing with super fandom and that kind of paying a premium is if you look at large format festivals, the tickets that sell out first are the VIP tickets. So those will be the first to go, you know? So people are in India, even though, you know, we're talking about things like, you know, low subscriber rates and people not willing to pay for their entertainment and all of that. The second you look at it through the live lens, that paradigm shifts. People are very willing to pay for live experiences. And I think, you know, post-COVID and the bounce back, we've seen this sort of revenge partying, revenge buying, going out and being like, I'm gonna go have the best time ever. Yes, that has trailed off a little bit, but folks are 100% willing to pay for a premium experience. And if that premium experience comes with artist interaction, you can charge a significant premium over that as well. And just on the earlier stuff, I just wanted to say that Bollywood has had no choice but to recognize independent music. Like they've literally woken up and said, hey, everything that's happening here is super dope. We should maybe participate in this and be a part of it. So you've got music supervisors like Ankur Tiwari bringing in somebody like an Oaf and Savera to soundtrack a Bollywood movie called Kho Gaye Hum Kahan. And that soundtrack is now on radio everywhere and kind of, you know, spread far and wide. So you're going to see the same thing in the Punjabi market, you know, with Diljit Dosanjh, who's a bona fide Punjabi superstar, is now acting in a movie directed by Imtiaz Ali and soundtrack by A.R. Rahman. You know, that crossover between Bollywood and independent, the lines have completely blurred. And I think, you know, the classification between film and non-film is kind of passé at this point.
So the you mentioned the kind of on the live side of things, this revenge partying, the bounce back from COVID. I think last year was a record year in terms of ticket sales in India. Festivals, club shows. Do you want to just sort of talk about where that's going, do you think? I mean, is there a danger that there's almost a saturation? Because even ticket prices were at a record high as well. So is there a danger there's a saturation point kind of coming up?
There's 1.4 billion of us. I think the saturation point is pretty far away. That's I'm gonna double down on that and say, you know, along with all the impressive numbers that, you know, we floated at the beginning of this chat, I think that the single most important detail that was perhaps missed is that unlike the Chinese market, English is a national language in India. So you've got a ton of people. So to build on the earlier stats, what do we have? We have a young population that's connected to the internet and speaks English. So any international artist that is not looking at India as the next potential viable touring market for them is doing it completely wrong. I know the majority of people in this room are probably looking at ways to get into India. And I think one of those things that's really important to recognize is, you know, don't be scared. It's not Hindi and Punjabi and Tamil and all that. Tons of people speak English, you know, in India. It's very easy to collaborate with Indian artists. A lot of Indian artists are also looking at ways to get outside of the market for them to travel abroad. But the large trends that we're seeing is Lollapalooza has now come down to India. I think that is the first of many international marquee properties that will be brought into India by various promoters. We have seen a significant uptick in the number of international tours that are happening, and that is totally genre agnostic, whether it's metal, you know, Skillbox Royden, who's here, has been doing a ton of great work promoting a bunch of different genres. So you're seeing singer-songwriters come down, metal bands come down, hip-hop artists come down. And I'm not even mentioning the electronic music, you know? In the last 10 years, on a Saturday night in Bombay, you can go and see probably 5 different international DJs on any given Saturday night, you know? So to answer the question, it's gone completely bonkers and it's going to continue to build.
But in terms of programming across the different festivals you work, how are you seeing that in terms of a mix of international mix versus domestic mix?
Yeah, I've been very blessed to have a long career as an artist manager, and I've spent 11 years, working with artists and building that part of the business out. There are Indian bona fide superstars now. Um, it is no longer just big ticket international guys who are moving, large numbers of tickets. Somebody like a Divine, a Nuclear, Pratik Kuhad, Ritviz, these guys are doing 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 hard tickets in markets like Indore, Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Guwahati, places that have traditionally not been our big metros and tier one cities, as you would say. Um, Indian artists are able to stand head to head with international superstars. And in fact, in, to answer the question about programming, we've made it a point sometimes to have an international artist play before an Indian artist, just because very traditionally it's always been the Indian guy opening for the international guy, but it doesn't need to be like that. We can turn that on its head. And I definitely feel like when we approach programming, it's very important to have the balance between stuff that maybe people haven't seen and then your homegrown sort of favorites, and the combination of those two things is what will drive tickets eventually.
So this being the gateway to India and this being an international audience here, and you touched on this a little bit, I just want us to go down the panel to wrap up here. And what is if someone comes up to you and says, like, what do I need to do to look at India? What are my first steps I should take? I mean, starting Mandar down at the end, what are the top bits of advice you would say about when approaching the Indian market for the first time?
I think the first thing is there's no one India. I think it's really very, very important to recognize that. It's like calling Europe one country. So there is no one India. That's one. The second thing is the myth that, and to mirror what Akhila and Tej and Dee have been saying, that the Indian consumer, it's not that they don't pay, and it's very evident from the live sector that they're paying and paying heavily. It's just about value consciousness. And that reverses back into time, effort, and face time. You cannot come to India like you can't go to China or any other market without devoting time and effort. That's two. Number three is fundamentally it's a low ARPU market, which basically means volumes work. So unless you're looking to play the broad game, I would say don't bother. Three things.
Yeah, Deepti.
I would say that you have a lot of data on hand. Use artist analytics, use the data that you have to understand what does your existing fandom look like in the country. Understand what that means and who are the right collaborators that you can work with in the country to make sure that your reach and your fandom is on the upward trend. I would think that is from me, that would be the single most, as YouTube, we would say, a short way of saying that, okay, this is how you make an entry into the country.
So what are some of the key data points you might look for?
You will be able to understand with the data that's on hand, which, like he said, it's not one India, right? So you will be able to understand where does your fan live? Which are those cities where your fans are truly present? And is that the right decision that you're making? So from something that is as, macro to really understanding that, okay, who is listening to my music and what else are they interested in? And how can I find common grounds to make sure I'm able to establish myself as an artist in this market?
Are you seeing a lot of collaborations taking place on shorts, for example? I mean, how sort of busy is that platform for you in terms of international cross collaboration?
I don't have the numbers on the, I can't share numbers on the top of my head, but I do know that with international music, the number of creations we see has been immense, right? And the thing that we were talking about earlier, that the fan sees no boundary or barrier from a language or a genre perspective anymore. So that in itself becomes a very, very big play in all of this.
Brilliant. Thank you. Akhila?
Yeah, first I want to echo what Mandar said. When you look at India or any emerging market, you can't just enter and expect overnight success. So the first thing I would say to any artist who's looking at India, please think about slow growth. Okay, it's not about overnight success. Doesn't sound
We,
fun,
we
but
want
it is
we want quick
sustainable.
wins. That's what we want here. So that'll be
Like
great. Thank you.
slow growth is sustainable growth. Like, just to give you an example, you and I, you were working with Love a couple of years ago, and like, just to give you guys context, if you're an international artist, there is immense opportunity in India, but you need to be willing to put in the time, and also actually come down to the country. So, but first you build on digital. Like when we worked with Love, we did many things when he was 150 or something, his ranking on the platform that I worked at. But we worked on him for 2 years to bring him into the top 50. It started with playlisting, but it went into creating social content, right? Getting him to react to a Pratik Kuhad video, because that's how you got new fans into the system, right? Then he comes down, he performs to 2,000 people. On a Monday night, right? Then he came back this year for Lollapalooza, and like I think he had far more people, right? But this journey took him at least 5 years. It's a mix of things that you have to do, which is your social media discovery, your DSP strategy. You need to then think about live as well. Unless you think 360 about India, you can't actually enter the market. So I think that's my big takeaway for anyone who's looking to come into the market.
I mean, thank you for raising Lauv, because he is a client of ours. So that we've been working with him for quite a long time in India, and as you say, it's taken many years. And just to tie that in, I think India went from being his number 17 market on YouTube to his number 1 market on YouTube over the course of several years. And I think that's an artist, for example, who he quite literally puts his heart and soul into his connection with his fans. And in India, through working with Akhila when we were previously at a DSP and working with YouTube, the fans kind of respond accordingly. They think this is now our artist, and we really take him to heart. So Lauv is a great example of that. Tej.
I'm gonna go with India is a market that needs to be invested in. It's not just gonna happen in a heartbeat. I think one of the big things that people need to recognize is like talk to your agents, talk to your managers, tell them to chill out, not ask for $100,000 every time they look at the Indian market. Yeah, there's a lot of us, but that doesn't mean that we've got bags of money waiting for you. Also, just because we're close to Dubai does not mean you're gonna get the same offers, you know? So that's number one. Number two, I think it's really important to, going back to the collaboration point and it not being one India, there are so many incredible creative people in India that you can collaborate with, whether that is a music video director, a graphic artist, a content creator, even a marketing firm. The creator economy in India overall is booming. It's not just music. So when you're looking at India, don't think, oh, I have to acknowledge this musician that I'm going to collaborate with, and this cross-pollination of our fans is what will result in fandom in India. No. Why don't you cast an Indian actor in your next music video? Why don't you work with the Indian music video director? There are ways to cross-collaborate across different mediums, and I think that might be a more interesting way to open things up. Because musician and musician is cool, but there's so much more you can do creatively in 2024. So I think those are two pieces of advice I'd share.
And just Mandar, quickly to finish on, so English language as a category in India has a bit of downward pressure, if you like. But I mean, how would you say international? Because in terms of programming at festivals and at a premium end, international artists still have a reasonably big draw. I mean, how would you say like international music is generally perceived, and is it kind of welcomed into the market, or is it less and less popular?
I think firstly, we have just that one genre, which is international music. It's not Australian, it's not British, it's not Canadian music. So it doesn't really matter. That's one. The second thing, to echo Tej's point, earlier over the last 2 decades, international music would mean just the top 40s, it would mean just hip hop, and it would mean the classics. And those 3 genres have now way expanded back. Today, on an average, on a streaming service, the share of international music is between 12 to 14 to 15%, depending on topicality of the hits. from a music industry perspective, you see that share being around the same thing. But what is increasing is consumption. It's about the pie increasing and not the share increasing. So theoretically, I don't think international music is going anywhere. The second thing is international for us earlier was about the West, but today that's Asian music as well. Like Korean music is really, really big, right? And I don't think that the time is far to see a Korean act maybe putting a collaboration together with maybe a Bollywood track, right? Or a local Indian act. I mean, it doesn't have to just be a Western track. I think it's what we're all saying on the panel today is that where you come from, it's really about the sound. It's really about the amount of creativity that you put in. And we firmly believe at Times Music that a collaboration is not about forcing two artists in a room together. It's about old school writing and two artists gelling together. So towards that end, yes, international music is not going anywhere. And I think the diaspora of international has increased from the West down to Korean and Japanese and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up there, but as I say, this is genuinely, I believe this is the most exciting music market in the world right now, and it's actually only just begun its massive ascent. So it's so interesting to hear what you guys are saying, and thank you very much